End the war on drugs. So says a high-profile panel of experts in a report released today by the Global Commission on Drug Policy. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, former U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, and these guys are no shrinking, they're not screaming liberals, and an array of current and former heads of state from nations like Mexico, Brazil, and Greece conclude in a report that the global war on drugs is an utter failure, and it's time to look into legalization. The Commission paid particular attention to the U.S. war on drugs, recommending that our nation may want to look at ways to treat addiction, like through better health care and not life prison sentences. As former Colombian President Cesar Gaviria said, we hope the United States at least starts to think there are alternatives. We don't enjoy seeing the U.S. evolving in a way that is compatible with our country's long-term interests. So what is the result? What is the rest of the world seeing that we don't see in America when it comes to the war on drugs? Joining me now to talk more about this issue is Sean Dungan, a former DEA analyst and now a speaker with the organization Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Sean, welcome, and my apologies if I just mangled your last name.
That's okay.
Dungan?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. I appreciate it. How have other nations around the world dealt with drug addiction? At the core of all of this, it seems that that's the real issue.
Sure.
These are addictive substances.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the biggest difference is between American policy and policy in Europe. That was kind of the focus of this report. Mm-hmm. And the biggest difference is, in Europe, the focus is on reducing harm. Right? It's looking at the problem of drug use and addiction and focusing their policies on how can we reduce the harm that's caused to individuals and to society through our drug policies, our counter-drug policies. And a good example of that is comparing Switzerland and the United States. In the United States, more than 15% of IV drug users are HIV positive. In Switzerland, that percentage is below 3%. And the reason is because there are heroin maintenance programs and needle exchange programs and that sort of thing in Switzerland, and so it's much safer. So that's really the difference in approach, whereas in the United States...
It seems that the average American would look at that and go, oh, but you're by essentially decriminalizing. This isn't legalizing heroin, but it's saying that this is a health problem, not a legal problem. By doing that, you're encouraging it. You're making it easier. That aren't you going to end up with more addicts?
Well, you know, the evidence really hasn't shown that. For instance, Portugal several years ago decriminalized possession of small amounts of all drugs, and they saw a very, very slight increase in drug use that was on par with the very slight increase in drug use that the rest of Europe saw that didn't have this decriminalization policy.
Didn't they also see a drop in petty crime?
They did, a drop in petty crime and a drop in heroin use specifically, and that's something that this report points out.
Because it kind of puts the pushers out of business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what our focus on prohibition, our prohibition strategy has really done is turn this multi-billion-dollar industry over to violent criminals. Yeah. And that's responsible for a lot of the death, disease, and destruction that's associated with drug use in this country.
Poll after poll of Americans shows that while most Americans don't want, drugs decriminalized or legalized, let's say, and think that there still should be some kind of legal prohibition against most drugs, dangerous drugs, let's say, that they still don't like the war on drugs. The fact that we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, the fact that our police are turning into SWAT teams that just didn't even exist 20 and 30 years ago, this hyper-militarization. To what extent is this being fueled by things like the private prison lobby? I understand that they're heavily lobbying people like yourself who've been in law enforcement for things like 3 strikes you're outlaws in California, for longer prison sentences. Is that the case?
Well, I think that's certainly a component of it, right? I mean, we have 2.5 million people in prison, so there's a lot of money to be made. It's also political ideology, and that's one of the arguments that the authors of this report made, is that, we need to move our focus from putting strategies in place that are based on political ideology and really inertia, right? This is the way we've done it for 40 or 50 years, so let's keep doing it, and looking at best practices in other nations and how can we improve this and make drug use less dangerous for society.
Is it safe to say that there's always going to be a small percentage of us, people among us, who are going to end up drug addicts, whether it's alcohol or nicotine or heroin or whatever it may be, and that therefore you're never going to stamp it out using only the police, that you have to bring the health department into this?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the percentage of Americans that are addicted to hard drugs, it's basically unchanged. It was about 1.3% before we started this war on drugs, and it's about 1.3% now. But we do know what does work. You know, look at tobacco. That's a perfect example. Right now, about half as many high school seniors smoke cigarettes as did 30 years ago. Right? But in the last 20 years, the percentage of high school seniors that smoke marijuana has doubled. So what this report really argues is, okay, let's look at the science, let's look at the epidemiological data, and then, you know, look at best practices in other countries and make a policy that works. And certainly, you know, harm reduction and approaching this problem as a public health issue rather than a criminal issue is a step in the right direction.
And incorporating alcohol and tobacco. I mean, tobacco, to the best of my knowledge, is A, 5 times more addictive than heroin. I read that in Science. And B, the only substance that we sell in the United States that, when used as directed, causes death.
Right, absolutely.
Shouldn't we be incorporating tobacco into our drug policies?
Oh, certainly, certainly.
And that argues more and more for it being a public health issue rather than a criminal issue.
Yeah, and you know what we did with tobacco is honest education, right, and addiction treatment programs.
And it worked.
And it's worked. It's worked tremendously.
Sean, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate the conversation. The world is getting the message about drugs. It's time for us to get it too. As long as there's money to be made with private prisons and an entire billion-dollar drug testing industry and a multi-billion-dollar industry hyper-arming police, it's going to take all of us speaking up to get Congress to ignore the lobbyists and all their money and end Nixon's drug wars. And if we don't, more lives will be ruined while these rogue industries make more billions.